Hey there, and welcome to this beginner-friendly tutorial on Silhouette Studio for laser cutting. I'm Bonnie from CBCO Designs, and whether you're brand new to Silhouette or just getting started with designing for a laser machine, you're in the right place. In this video, I'll walk through the top 10 tools you need to know to create laser-ready designs with confidence. And the best part, we'll be creating a simple practice file, so by the end, you'll have a real design ready to go. Let's get started. Step 1, we're going to set up our workspace. Before we dive into tools, let's make sure you have your workspace set up for success. Open Silhouette Studio and start a new document. You can go to File, New, and it will open a blank page for you. Over here on the right-hand side, you have your page set up. So you're going to want to say that your machine you're using is set to none, since we're not actually using a Silhouette machine. Your cutting mat, you're going to want to also say none. And then your media size, you can set to whatever you want. I would recommend setting it to custom and then choosing the size of your laser bed. So let's use Glowforge as an example, and the width would be 19 and the height would be 12. Now, if we go over here to our grid settings and show our grid, you can see your space there. I actually prefer working without my grid on, so for now we will turn it off. All right, now we're ready to jump into our first tool. So the most used tool is going to be your selection and move tool. So that's for basic navigation and object selection. So if we have an object on our screen here and we're on our select tool, we can use that to move this shape around, to stretch it out, that way or that way. And if you're ever on another tool and you want to get back to your selection tool, you can always just press your escape button and it will bring you back to your selection tool. The next couple tools we're going to talk about are the drawing tools. So there's a few here. You have your line tools, your drawing tools, and your flexi shape tools. So lines, pretty self-explanatory. If you just hover your cursor over the button here, it will give you more options. So you have straight lines, polygons, and curved shapes. And then your drawing tools have rectangles, which can also be square, rounded, and ellipses or polygons. So if you want your shape to be perfect circle, for example, if you draw with the ellipse like this, it will be an oval. If you press your shift button, it will turn that into a perfect circle for you. And then your flexi shape tool has a bunch of preset shapes in here, which are super handy. So for example, if I want to draw a star, I could just select that. And then you have a couple of different options in here. So we'll have a slider bar that will change the number of points on your star. And then this little red button here will allow you to alter your shape as well. Okay, tool number 3 is going to be on your right-hand side, and it is your modify panel. So I use this a lot for layered designs. So the first one we're going to talk about is weld. So that's if you wanted to turn two shapes into one. So for example, if I wanted to put these together, I can overlap them, select both, and select weld, and now you have one shape. I'll undo that for now. The next one is subtract. So if we have our two shapes overlapped and we select both and select subtract all, it will cut one out of the other. So you can see that the circle got cut out of the rectangle. And the last one is intersect. So if we overlap our shapes, for example, if I put this star over top and we select them both and say intersect, it keeps only the overlapping area. Okay, tool number 4 is your cut settings and line colors. So that's going to be up here. So as you know, lasers use lines as cut or score directions and fills as engraving. So if we wanted to cut this shape, we want to make sure that we have our color set to whatever you use to differentiate your cut setting. So I use red, and then you want to make sure that this is your fill is set to nothing. If we wanted to engrave this part, we would want to make sure that your line is set to nothing and that your fill is set to whatever you use for a fill setting. So I use blue. So that would tell our laser that we want to cut this red area, and then we would engrave this blue area. You would use a third color for score. So if I wanted to add a circle and I wanted my laser to score that, I would select that. And again, it's going to be just a line color, so I use black, and then you want to make sure that you have no fill. Okay, tool number 5 is going to be the offset tool. So if I wanted to create an offset of this shape here, we would go over here on the right to the offset panel, and you have two options here. You have an external offset or an internal offset. So offset here would be an exterior outline that you're creating. You can choose your distance here, and you have a couple of options here. You can have a corner like that, or a smooth rounded corner. And when you have that how you like it, you just hit apply. Now, if we wanted to create an internal offset, again, you just select your object, hit internal offset, and it will create an offset inside your shape. Okay, tool number 6 is the trace tool. So that's the one over here that kind of looks a little bit like a butterfly. And you can use this to convert your images like JPEGs or PNGs into vector cut paths. So I just clicked and dragged this picture that I drew on my iPad into my Silhouette program from my Photos app. And so this is not laser ready. Your laser cannot read this type of file. So if I wanted to turn this into a scalable vector, you would select trace area. I'm going to put a little box around that flower there, and then it's going to trace around anything that's yellow. Sometimes you might need to play around with this threshold bar to make sure that it captures everything that you are happy with, and then hit trace. So now we can get rid of this JPEG, and we have a vector file. Tool number 7 is our text tool. So over here on the left, you can click on the text and then click anywhere in your design to type in your text. Then when you select it, on your right hand side, you have your text style panel, and that's where you can select your font. And there are a couple more options down here, like line spacing. So that's the space between your different lines of text. And then your character spacing is the spacing between each individual letter. So if I wanted to cut this all out and have them overlap so that it's super easy for assembly, I would decrease my character spacing so that they are all touching each other. And then I would need to weld this, like we learned about before in the modify panel, so that it doesn't cut out these tiny little pieces here, and it cuts it all as one shape. So there we go. Next, we're going to talk about the align and spacing tools, which is over on this side here in the transform panel. There are also some shortcuts up here, but if I wanted to perfectly center this text over our little daisy here, I could highlight all of them, and then you can either center them horizontally, vertically, or just center all in one step. And there we go. One thing that I like to do when I have a shape that I know that I might want to use again is save it to my library. So say I wanted to save this flower because I think I might use it in multiple different files. I can go up to File, Save As, and Save to Library. So when we do that, I'll just name it Flower. So it will save it right into your library right up here, so it's easy to access for future designs. There it is. So now the most important step is to save this as a laser ready file. So if we go to File, Save As instead of Save, save to your hard drive, and then you're going to change the file type here to SVG, which is a scalable vector graphic. That's what most lasers require as a file type to read, and then hit OK. Now let's use everything we learned to create a simple laser-ready personalized cake topper. Using the drawing tool to create a rectangle, I'm going to use this as my guide. So I'm going to make this about 5.5 by 7.5, and that's going to tell me the approximate overall size of the cake topper that I want to make. So we're going to start with a rectangle as the stake to our cake topper. So I like to make this about 0.32-ish inches wide. I'm going to move that, and I'm going to align these center And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to use this point selection, and I'm going to use this edit points to add a node right in the middle here, and then I'm going to click and drag that down to create a little bit of a point. Now at this point, I would actually save this to my library so that I have a set cake topper guide that I can always use, so that I don't have to figure out every time how big I should make it and how wide the stake should be. So again, to do that, you go to File, Save As, Save to Library. Okay, next we're going to use the Flexi Shapes tool to draw a little daisy. So I'm going to make that about that big. We can always change the size later. And then I'm going to change the number of petals to 5. And then I'm going to drag that in a little bit. Perfect. And then we're going to add a circle to the center of our daisy. Make sure you press and hold Shift while you're dragging that out to make it a perfect circle. And then I'm going to align those center. And now we are going to type our text. So I'm going to say Georgia, and then I'm going to make another text box because I might make these different fonts or different sizes of fonts. I'm going to say is, and then we're going to use that daisy as the O in 1. So once I have my text typed out and approximately in place, I'm going to select them, and then I'm going to select the fonts that I like. Now I'm just going to adjust them to the size I like and position. Okay, now these cursive letters need to be welded so that they cut out as one individual shape on the laser. So I'm going to weld that. And then these little dots on the eyes, I'm actually going to weld as well to their main words. So I'm going to just move them down a little bit. I'm actually going to move this G over as well so it's attached to make for super easy assembly. I'm going to select all that again and hit weld. Now I'm going to actually group these. So I'm going to say Object Group, and then I'm going to group these, Object Group, so that I can align these center, and I'm going to align them with the stake as well. So I selected everything here, and I'm going to say Align Center vertically. So now everything is centered, and I'm actually gonna make these a little bit larger. There we go. Now I'm gonna create an offset to create the backer of this cake topper because it's gonna be double layered. So this text is gonna be sitting on top of a back layer. So we're gonna select everything, go over to the offset panel, hit offset. You can adjust your distance here. I'm going to hit apply. I think that looks good. Now, I don't really like these little cutouts that it created. So what I'm going to do is say Object Release Compound Path. That releases any of the inner parts. And then I'm going to deselect my outer edge. So I'm going to press Shift and click it. So that leaves everything else selected. And then I'm going to press Delete. There we go. So now I'm going to weld the stake to the backer. So I'm going to select those two. We're going to go over to our Modify panel, and we're going to hit Weld. There we go. So one other thing I like to do is create an internal offset so that I can see exactly where to place these objects onto the backer when I'm assembling my cake topper. So I'm going to select all of those items, and then I'm going to go over to the Offset menu again, and we're going to do an internal offset this time. And we want it to be pretty small. So 0.025 is what I like to use. And then I'm going to hit apply. All of those little individual pieces are not grouped yet. So I'm going to say Object Group just so that they don't get moved around. And since we want that to be scored into the backer and not cut out, I'm going to change my line color to black. And I'm going to also select my backer. So I'm holding Shift and clicking my backer, and then I'm going to say Object Group so that the backer and the scored part are one. So now we can delete our guide. So the last thing we need to do is take this little circle and copy and paste it out of the flower so we can cut it out in a different color. So I'm just gonna right click, select copy, right click again, and select paste. So now we have all of the parts. These are gonna be the parts that are gonna be attached to the backer. So the last thing that you wanna do before you save this as your SVG is to make sure that everything is on your working grid. So we're gonna go back to the page setup tab here, and we're going to go over to our grid and we're going to say show grid. So you can see here these parts are not on our grid, so we want to make sure that everything is on our grid, and then that way when someone is opening up this file, all of those parts will show up. So last step, we're going to go file, save as, save to hard drive, name it whatever you want, and then change your format to SVG. And you're done. You just created a simple customized cake topper. Now I challenge you to take these skills and design something on your own. Have fun.